February 20, 1943, north of Kasserine Pass, Tunisia. The morning sun had barely pierced the desert haze when German tank commanders witnessed something that defied logic. Across the battlefield, American Sherman tanks were moving, not in chaos, not in confusion, but in perfect, synchronized precision. 5 tanks, scattered across broken terrain, advanced as if controlled by a single mind. No visual signals, no dispatch riders, not even flares. Yet each one seemed to know exactly where the others were. Through the dust and gunfire, they moved like a living organism, covering one another's blind spots, closing gaps, coordinating attacks. The Germans couldn't believe it. They had spent years perfecting armored warfare, writing the doctrine of blitzkrieg itself. And yet, here they were facing an army that seemed to have reinvented communication. What they didn't realize was that the Americans had brought something entirely new to the battlefield, a technology so advanced, it made German radio systems look like relics from another era. The war for Europe wasn't just being fought with tanks and shells. It was being fought on invisible waves. While German engineers obsessed over thicker armor and bigger guns, American scientists were perfecting something far more subtle, the art of communication. In 1941, the U.S. Army standardized a new kind of radio system for all its medium tanks, the SCR-508, and its variants, the 528 and 538. These weren't ordinary radios. They used frequency modulation, or FM, a breakthrough that would quietly rewrite the rules of armored warfare. Inside the labs of the Galvin Manufacturing Company, later known to the world as Motorola, engineers Daniel E. Noble and Henryk Magnuski were building something revolutionary. They designed a rugged, 181-pound radio system that could survive the violent vibrations, dust, and chaos inside a tank, and still deliver clear, reliable communication. Where the German Fug-5 struggled to transmit beyond a few hundred meters, the American BC-600 for transmitter blasted 25 watts of power, 2.5 times stronger, with crystal-controlled precision that kept every tank on the same page. For the first time in history, every tank wasn't just a weapon, it was a node in a network. A connected system of steel and signal, fighting as one. November 8, 1942. As American armor landed in North Africa during Operation Torch, their opponents, the battle-hardened Afrika Corps, were about to witness something they couldn't explain. German tank platoons operated under a rigid system. 1 or 2 command tanks had transmitters. The rest could only listen. Orders went one way. If a command tank was destroyed, coordination vanished instantly. The Americans, however, were doing something else entirely. Every Sherman could transmit. Every tank commander could talk, listen, and lead if needed. When the fighting began, the difference was immediate. Amid gunfire and dust, scattered American units maintained perfect coordination. Tanks that had never fought together acted like brothers in arms, warning each other of ambushes, calling in artillery support, coordinating attacks with surgical timing. To German observers, it looked like chaos somehow organized itself. They didn't realize that in those moments, the Americans were speaking through the most advanced communication system the battlefield had ever seen. In September 1943, the war moved to Italy, where mountains turned radio signals into static and echoes. For the Germans, who still relied on amplitude modulation, communication all but collapsed in the steep terrain. But for the Americans, this was where FM technology truly shined. While German signals dissolved in interference, American tankers continued to coordinate through valleys and ridgelines as if the terrain didn't exist. The SCR-508 handled multipath interference effortlessly, allowing tanks separated by mountains to move as one. And when American infantry struggled to communicate with armor due to frequency differences, the crews came up with a simple but genius fix. They bolted field telephones to the outside of their tanks, wired directly to internal radios. Infantrymen could now run up and talk directly to the tank crew, mid-battle. It was field innovation at its finest, a small modification that saved countless lives and redefined tank infantry cooperation forever. By the summer of 1944, the Allies were fighting their way through the hedgerows of Normandy. Thick, claustrophobic terrain made visibility nearly impossible. But while German tanks fought blind, American crews had a new kind of vision, made of sound waves. During Operation Cobra, The U.S. 2nd Armored Division coordinated over 200 Sherman tanks simultaneously. Orders, enemy positions, and artillery coordinates moved through radio networks faster than any army had ever seen. German defenders couldn't comprehend it. To them, it looked like the Americans could see through walls, reacting instantly to every threat, shifting formations mid-battle, firing artillery within minutes of target calls. What they didn't know was that every Sherman tank, every commander, and every artillery observer were part of one synchronized system, a moving organism of steel and signal. The Germans called it supernatural, the Americans called it standard procedure. German intelligence noticed something strange. Reports kept describing American units that moved with uncanny coordination, as if telepathic. Their conclusion: better discipline, better training. They couldn't have been more wrong. They had no idea the Americans had leapfrogged them technologically. While Germany's SCR-508 radios struggled to reach even a mile in motion, American FM sets maintained contact across 10 or more. And while the Germans targeted command tanks, thinking they were cutting off leadership, they didn't realize every Sherman was a command tank. It was one of the greatest intelligence oversights of the war. The enemy's strength was hidden in plain sight, in the invisible spectrum of communication. At the height of the war, Motorola's Chicago factory became the beating heart of American connectivity. Before the war, it had made car radios. Now, it was building 50,000 precision-engineered tank radios, one for every Sherman ever produced. Each set contained nearly 3,000 individual components, capacitors, resistors, and crystal oscillators that had to survive shock, dust, and heat. This wasn't just production, it was industrial engineering on a national scale. While Germany built superior tanks, but couldn't equip them with adequate communication, America built good enough tanks and made sure every single one could talk. That difference, quantity combined with connectivity, changed the course of armored warfare forever. By 1945, the advantage had become undeniable. At the Remagen Bridge, radio reports reached headquarters within minutes of discovery. Divisions hundreds of miles apart shifted instantly to exploit the opportunity, something German commanders could only dream of. Inside the collapsing German front, communication failed everywhere. Telephone lines were bombed, radios were jammed by their own interference. Entire divisions lost contact with each other. Meanwhile, American tank units, connected through FM networks, moved like flowing water, adjusting and adapting in real time. German commanders couldn't keep up, and as one field marshal reportedly said, "We built better tanks, but you made them work together." After the war, both the Soviets and the newly formed Bundeswehr studied what happened. Their conclusion was simple: communication had won the war. Modern main battle tanks, from the Leopard to the Abrams, carry advanced digital radios that can trace their lineage directly to the SCR-508. The same principle remains, that a connected force will always defeat an isolated one. From the deserts of North Africa to the jungles of Vietnam, from Iraq in 1991 to modern warfare today, the lesson hasn't changed. The side with the clearest voice wins. The Sherman tank was never the fastest, never the strongest. But it was the smartest, because it could think, act, and fight as one with every other tank around it. In a war defined by firepower, it was communication that quietly decided victory. Those invisible waves that carrying voices, commands, and warnings were more powerful than any shell or cannon. The Americans didn't just build tanks, they built a network. And on that network, they built victory.